even though we're doing things differently, we're all experiencing very similar challenges in our day-to-day implementation. So there are no answers, but I'm really enjoying it. Ruth.
Thanks, Justin and Susan. I think what I've definitely appreciated being doing differently is maybe similar to you, Justin, but exploring different approaches. So I've really appreciated all the books and the different references to sort of go down different journeys that different organisations have been down to appreciate how many different approaches there are, and yeah, maybe also to then feel a bit more confident in the fact that our journey might be very different to everyone else's. Yeah. I'll pick Angela.
She appears to be frozen somehow. Maybe pick somebody else and she'll sort herself out.
Sorry, Andrea.
I think what I've noticed two things. One is I don't think I'm taking in enough. There's so much to learn, and then I notice just every now and then I'm talking to someone at work, some other context, who will say, "Oh, people here are doing this differently." So I feel like I'm starting to just understand all the possibilities and individual ways groups are going about change. So that's really exciting. Yeah, and the second thing, just a wee bit more, like more hopeful, pushing about wanting to see self-managing, actually be active for our work, increased desire for it, maybe. Yeah. Denver.
Thanks, Andrew. I think something that I've caught myself doing a bit more, probably more obvious during our team meetings, spaces where we're gathered together as a team, is explore a bit more of the left field suggestions or ideas from team members that perhaps I would have thought were just that previously, left field ideas that probably we aren't going to take on board moving forward as a team, that probably require either pay too much effort or too much high risk for no reward. And I found myself similar to what Susan was saying in terms of listening a little more actively, and probably not due to the format, but due to what we've explored as a team. And I think that has in turn been appreciated much more by the team, and I think that in turn has allowed us to explore ideas that perhaps we wouldn't have given the time or day for before. And seeing that take traction is pretty exciting and pretty cool. Wendy.
Thanks, Denver. Hi, everyone. I think something that I have a greater appreciation for now, or perhaps hopefully the capacity to be able to support, is more the emergence of a solution that needs to come from within the organisation. It needs to be unique to the people that are there, and holding that balance between it hopefully making a difference for people that we're supporting, and at the same time being a much better environment for people to work in. So I think they've been the three things that I've really been more mindful of, I guess. So I'd like to call on Kate Lawrence.
Thank you. I think, thinking about it now, there's two things. One is I've set up a group in Melbourne, so I'm really excited about that, called Reinventing Work. But the second thing I think is really exploring and understanding tolerance for uncertainty. So in my personal life, but also the kind of the balance between certainty and uncertainty, and organisations having certainty but also building people's tolerance for uncertainty, and so thinking about processes and activities that can do that, that can explore that. So, Nick.
Hello. What have I caught myself doing differently? I think for me, it comes down to just greater awareness around how work is done. So not just what we're doing, but how we're doing it, the processes and structures around that. Greater consciousness around how decisions are being made, what the group looks like, the group of people involved in doing the work or making the decision, just really questioning that and noticing tensions between our values and the way work is structured. So just greater awareness of those tensions and just getting really curious with that. Nikki.
Drat, I was hoping to have a few more minutes to settle in. I think my answer would be, I guess, just trying to work things through and think differently about doing things, which might be exactly what you just said, actually, Nick. But yeah, really trying to think, how do we include others in our decisions, and being quite active in doing that. And that struggle between sometimes when there's time pressures or there's something that, you know, has to be done, how do we really manage that challenge around involving people when there's like those pressures to take into account as well.
Tag somebody.
Sorry, Justin.
Sorry, Justin's already gone. Hold on. I'll just post here who.
Simon. Simon hasn't been. Sarah and Lee.
Yeah, sorry. That's who's gone. I've just put it in the chat.
For me, it's reflecting on how subtle a conversation has to be between, or just making a distinction between slipping into command and control and a conversation which is more facilitative. So that's one aspect of just growing in an awareness of how that happens, or how easily it can happen that you move into command and control, and often without thinking about it. And then secondly, to think more about how we are working as teams and how well are we connecting with our participants. So for me, it's more two framings that are looking at both the nature of the conversations we're having and whether in fact we're conscious of how our practice will impact or it does care for participants, but we need to foreground that more. So that's what it would be for me. Who's left, Susan?
Sarah, Lee, Katie.
Okay, Katie.
Oh, she seems to be away from her computer.
Okay. Sorry, who was left?
Sarah, Lee, Kate, Katie.
Sarah.
Sarah, you seem to be muted. Oh, we can't hear you. Oh, it doesn't look like you're muted, but we still can't hear you.
I'm happy to go next while Sarah and Lee are trying to sort their volume out. I think when you said the question, what kind of came up for me, and we had a bit of a conversation about it last week, and I think it was kind of led by you, Simon, which was the reading and the experiences of others is really helpful, but it doesn't beat doing the work for real. And what that, somebody else said, although we're doing it differently, we're having some really shared experiences of the pain points and the highlights. And so, so being in it, I suppose, is probably what I'm noticing, and the value of that. So there's only really Katie and Sarah and Lee. So
maybe Sarah.
Angela, you didn't go, did you, Angela? Because I think you got kicked out at one point.
I was really hoping to fly under the wire with that. Yeah, my internet connection isn't that flash, I have to say. There's a lot of stuff kind of going on within the organisation, and in my role, I straddle several distinct kind of teams. So for me, my noticing about myself is like whether or not I actually want to be an active participant in particular teams. And so this is this, in some instances, I think that I want to use this whole process of, actually, really, I can opt out, which is a very powerful thing, because I think what the self-managing journey brings up is all of our unconscious, subconscious kind of power and control stuff as well. And so it sort of plays out within the teams around, it's all changing and now we're trying to flatten the structure. I still want to have sort of some kind of ascendancy within, what's happening. And I'm probably being a little bit too honest here, but those power plays, where we're wanting to kind of smash the existing hierarchical structures, we don't actually, in that process, smash basic human nature and our basic experiences of how to gain purchase and power within our interrelationships with each other. So it can be quite a demanding space to be in, while everyone's sorting out where they sit within a framework. So I've noticed that I'm more willing to maybe not participate and just allow whatever to unfold. Have we got Sarah and Lee back?
Or Katie?
Yeah. Forgive me, I'm a little bit frazzled today, so Friday. But yeah, this course has been really thought-provoking, actually, and has brought up a lot of different things. But I think one thing I've particularly been thinking about recently is how we can really meaningfully engage people at all layers in these types of conversations, and what that looks like, to involve maybe the grassroots or ground level staff, right up to the top. So that's what I've been spending time thinking about.
Sarah, Lee, have you managed to sort your audio?
They haven't. They have got something in the chat, so I'll read it out on your behalf, Sarah and Lee. So for both Lee and I, we've been able to empower our teams and really explore the decision-making process. We are working towards self-managed support hubs. It's been a great learning experience for us to pass on some of the decision-making capacity and not freak out. That's cool, thank you. I think that leaves us with you, Helen.
I guess it's a bit hard for me to talk about the impact of the course, but certainly the impact of my ongoing journey in self-management is I'm much more reflective about power and how I'm using power and what I'm noticing about power in meetings, and thinking differently about something that in England is called co-production, but it's how we work with people with lived experience to be partners in decision making. So I think that's over the last 2 or 3 months, those are the things that have been really occupying how I'm thinking and behaving.
Oh, and Michaela, sorry.
No worries, thank you. I thought I was going to slip on by as well. Apologies for being late. Yeah, the power one is something that's come up for me a lot in our self-managed organisation, and how do I motivate without the power energy behind it, and get people more involved in the consent decision making that we use on Lumio, and being involved in those meetings that are about decisions and the organisation. Interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Michaela. So, Susan, I'm just thinking that before we'll jump in. Helen, if we've got you until 8ish, one of the suggestions we had is that we divide the time between about half an hour around wellbeing teams and what they are, what they do, how they operate, and then probably about 10 minutes, but if it's juicy, more, about your personal journey. Does that sound okay? Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions about wellbeing teams, and then I'll hand over to Susan around your journey. So because not everybody will know a lot about wellbeing teams, are you happy to tell us a bit about what they are, what they do, and how they operate? And if we've got about half an hour, I know you quite like a time, so I'll keep you to time. Is that all right?
Thank you. So I'll get started, and Kate, jump in if there's specific things that you'd like me to focus on more, or of course anybody. So Wellbeing Teams is a provider organisation registered with CQC, who are the regulators in the UK, and they have emerged from my interest in Birdsong. So it started with reading Frederick Laloux's book, getting very excited about that, looking at Birdsong, getting excited about that, but recognising that in the UK it's very, very different to the Netherlands. So, for example, it's a legal requirement that we have a registered manager for each of the service. So our first challenge was, how do we fulfill that legal requirement and be self-managed? So I became the registered manager and used that position not to manage, of course, but to still hold the accountability of the legal accountability of the organisation to CQC and the local authorities. So that's been part of our journey, is how do we manage the expectations of the local authorities and the regulators and still be able to operate in a self-managed way. So we have teams in Wigan. Our first teams were in Wigan, and we currently have 3 teams in Wigan. We have a team in Oxfordshire, and we have 2 teams in Thurrock, which is near London. And we're registered for delivering personal care or domiciliary care to people at home. And our purpose is to do whatever we can to support people to live well at home and be part of their community. So at the moment, we largely support people living in their own homes who tend to be older, who have a commissioned service from the local authority. And so the wellbeing workers will be supporting people right now. We'll be supporting people to get up in the morning, get dressed, have a shower, have breakfast, take medication. They'll then be supporting people to have lunch, evening meals, go to bed, take medication, go out. But then as far as we can, we're doing things that make people's day and things that support people to have the lifestyle that they want to. So Kate, I can talk about the practical stuff that we do, or how we organise ourselves in a self-management way.
How are you organised? I think that helps everybody get a picture of how it works.
Okay, so we are similar to Birdsong. We are in small neighbourhood teams of no more than 12 people, and they're supported by the wellbeing leader, who I said takes the legal responsibility for delivering the service. What is really distinctive about what we do, I think, is the importance of our meetings. So we have a 2-hour meeting every week, which all the team members are expected to go to. And that follows a structure that is based in holacracy tactical meetings, with some additional things that we've been developing and testing out too. We're paperless, and we don't use email. So all of our conversations with each other happen on Slack. So Slack is the number 2 business app in the world, and it's a way that we have conversations. And we also have apps, which is where our care and support planning happens, and all the information that we need to hold about people. We have a really strong focus on transparency. So after team members have done a visit, we complete a record of it, and we're able to capture that through the voice of the people we support. So if I was supporting Kate, I could say to Kate what's worked about our visit today, and Kate could tell me, it would automatically be recorded on my app, and I'd ask her what hasn't worked. Is there anything that we could do differently, and that would be recorded as well, and we can upload photos onto that. So we're trying to really think about power in relation to the people we support and how the teams work together. So people say to me, can we come and see wellbeing teams in action? And I say, well, you can't be asking to come and watch us doing personal care with people, because obviously that wouldn't be appropriate. But because we talk about people we support in team meetings, it would be very hard for people to come and sit in on a team meeting and us to be able to do that, or to join us on Slack. But when people say, where do you see self-management in wellbeing teams, it's our team meetings and in Slack that you really see self-managing happening.
Helen, can you tell us a bit about the team meetings, about the process around it?
So if we're imagining that we're all face-to-face in a room together in a team meeting, now there's 16 of us, so there'd only be 12 in the team meeting. The first thing that we do is a check-in, and we've started to do that in 2 different ways. So we have a board, and the board has got different faces down the side of it, and from being delighted and happy and joyful to feeling there and needing quite a lot of support. So there's 7 different gradients of that. So the first thing you'll do is you'll pick up a sticky with your name on it, and you'll tell us how you're feeling today. And then we'll sit down and we'll do a check-in round, not dissimilar to what you've just done. And we have 2 kinds of check-in rounds. One is what's working for you at home and at work. And the reason we ask that question is that we're always deepening our understanding of each other as people, not just as work colleagues. And that comes from the work of Nancy Klein, who says that we do our best thinking in the presence of full information. And full information is both what's working well and going well and what's difficult. And because meetings tend to just focus on what's difficult, starting with something that's positive helps us think well. Or we might do a check-in round that's just where are you and how are you right now, to enable people to put to one side things that are troubling them and try and be really focused in the meeting. And then the next thing we do to help us really be present in the meeting is we'll do a minute of mindfulness. And sometimes we'll use a minute from an app. And sometimes we'll just do 6 breaths together, or close our eyes and do whatever practice we want to do. So we focus on bringing ourselves to be present in the meeting. And then the next stage is focusing on the people we support. And we have what's called a Living Well at Home board. So again, a big physical board, and it's split into 3. And wellbeing workers will each be a link worker for 2 or 3 people that we support. So these will be people that we'll be expecting people to be particularly focused on. It's like it's like key working in other parts of health and social care. And the link worker will have 3 stickers again, just ordinary little stickers with the initials of the 3 people that they're link wellbeing workers for. And we'll get up and put those based on where they think the person is in their well-being. So that means that if you're supporting somebody called Mandy Jones, you'll have a sticky with MJ on it. You'll be thinking about whether you think Mandy's on track, off track, or way off track with her well-being and how we're supporting her to live well at home and be part of the community. You'll put your sticky where you think. So you might think she's way off track because you're concerned about her at the moment. So that means that we get a snapshot immediately of how everybody's doing. So a bit like multidisciplinary team meetings, but without taking ages on it, we'll just get this immediate snapshot. And then what we'll do is everybody who's off track or way off track will then have a conversation about what we can do to support them to be on track, and that will be recorded in the minutes of our meeting. Now, we're really clear about our sphere of decision making, what's within our gift. So sometimes it'll be referrals or requesting assessments or requesting equipment. Sometimes it's thinking about what we could be doing and doing differently. When people are in probation with us, we have the same board for people reporting on their probation status. So our probation is over 6 months. We have key tasks that are expected to happen over these 6 months and key competencies we want to see people developing. So let's imagine that Katie is with our team. She's just joined us. And there's 3 other people who are in probation. You'll have a sticky with your name on it, and you'll put your sticky where you think you are, on track, off track, way off track. And if you're way off track, we'll be saying to you, what do you need to get back on track? So it's an opportunity for people to talk about what they need to progress well with their probation. So that happens at the beginning of the meeting. And then we've got metrics. So we have transparent information sharing across the whole team. So our metrics reflect the data that CQC requires us to collect and act on, but also metrics in relation to our role. So over the last week, we'll say, have there been any compliments over the last week? Have there been any complaints? Have there been any incidents or accidents? But right down to how many Facebook posts have we posted, because one of the roles within the team is a role of a storyteller, and we have metrics for how much storytelling and sharing we want to do too. So we have a quick scan of the metrics, and that might lead to some questions or conversation too. So the first part of the meeting, the first 20 minutes of the meeting, is both coming into the meeting and being present and checking in together, and looking at how we think we're doing around the people we support, around people doing probation, and around the metrics too. And then the remainder of the meeting is split into another two halves. And the next bit is raising and addressing tensions. And again, this comes directly from holacracy. And a tension is either something that's stopping you doing your best work, or it's something that you see we could be doing better. And the tension is you can see something we could be doing better that you've seen from somewhere else. So for those of you who've checked in this morning and said, you know, it's been interesting hearing some of the ideas, you could be raising that as a tension in the meeting, saying, so that you hear what Justin's been doing in his team is this, and your tension is wanting to explore how we can be introducing those in our team. So it's a balance of what we can see, how we can improve, as well as things that are getting in the way. So we then ask the team members, and we do this in a round, does anybody get any tensions? And people just give us a 1 or 2 word placeholder. So it might be, my tension is around the rota, or my tension is around our peak-on scores, or my tension is around how we're organising holiday at the moment. So it would be that. And then we go through each of the tensions and we ask people for what they need. And I think this is where we see the sort of adult to adult communication here, and supporting people to be in touch with what they need and be able to ask for what they need. So what's different here is that you won't have submitted an agenda item the week before. The agenda happens on the fly. So we're dealing with the things that are current and are currently occupying us. And rather than giving a 10-minute context to why this is a big deal for you, what we invite you to do is to ask for what you need. So that might be a piece of information from somebody, or it might be ideas from everybody and doing that as a round, or it might be inviting people to problem solve with you. And then at the end of that, we ask you whether you've had what you need, and we also capture that. The reporter recorder captures that too. And the meetings are 2 hours, and we usually have 15 minutes to focus on a particular theme. So we just had our latest Peak-on scores. So Peak-on is the equivalent of a staff satisfaction score. It's external to wellbeing teams, but it reflects our values and it reflects the current thinking on staff engagement. And everybody will do 5 to 10 minutes on their Peak-on score once a month. We then get the whole, so I get the whole scores from across all of the teams, but the team will then get the score for their team. And it's both a numerical value for a set of 10 questions and comments. And what we feed back to the team is their top 3 areas and their lowest 3 areas. And then we ask people what they want to do in response to their top 3 areas and their lowest 3 areas. So we'll spend 15 minutes in a team meeting once a month saying, what are we saying to each other about how we're doing? How do we celebrate the top 3 areas? What do we want to do about the lowest 3 areas? What decisions are we going to make? And do we need the national team to be doing something differently? And if we do request that, how do we get that information to the national team? And then right at the end of the meeting, we have a checkout round as well. So that's what our meetings look like, Kate.
Helen, there was a question from Ruth asking who designed the meeting structure.
So I was originally from HSA, and my journey around self-management is deciding to cede my authority as the CEO, and HSA, who is a training and development organisation, become self-managed. And we invited Susan to coach us in that transition, because that was a huge transition. And as part of that, several of us became practitioners in holacracy. So we learnt holacracy, and we learnt the meeting format for holacracy. But in HSA, we've been training people in what we call positive inductive meetings. So we had a legacy of that too. So we put together holacracy with what we'd learned from positive inductive meetings. And then we were working with somebody called Andy Brogan, who is helping us around quality and improvement. And he introduced us to the on-track, off-track, way off-track boards. So we put the three of those together. And we keep iterating around that as well. But that's been pretty standard for the past 8 months.
Another couple of questions, and then I was hoping you to move into recruitment. Mm-hmm. So a question from Andrea: how does the wellbeing teams guard on Slack personal information if it's across a personal network? And also, what app is it that's provided useful?
So if we go for the second question first, we work with a company called Access, and their care and support planning program is called Mavizio. But the reason we went with Mavizio, and it's also used by Cornerstone, is so that we can change all of the paperwork to have it reflect how we want it to work, rather than being having somebody else's paperwork. So we went with that for that kind of flexibility. But in terms of Slack, we are obviously very sensitive to sharing people's information. So if referring to people we support, we only refer to them by their initials, so that we're not sharing confidential data in that way.
Great, thanks, Helen. So I know that you're really passionate about recruitment in wellbeing teams, and I think people would find that really helpful. And I also think it gives a kind of into what it would be like to work at wellbeing teams. So you're happy to talk us through how that works?
Of course. So the challenge was that, well, two things really. I'm part of several Facebook groups where registered managers post. And what I see every day, and I saw yesterday, that somebody had been advertising for roles on Indeed, which is one of these big job notice boards, that they'd set aside a whole day for interviews. They had 10 interviews booked, and not one single person turned up. And that is a really, really common experience for people in the UK for any role in adult social care, and that the narrative in the UK is there's a crisis in recruitment in adult social care. And what we thought about in wellbeing teams is, if you come from a traditional home care organisation to work with us, not just because we're self-managed, but the whole way that we operate. So one of the big differences for us is most traditional organisations have a really strict professional boundaries policy that says that you are not friendly with people, essentially. If you meet people in the street, you barely acknowledge them, you never accept gifts, etc. And we think all of that is wrong. And we have relationship-based care, and we actively encourage relationships. And we have lots of safeguarding stuff that we've got in place to safeguard that, but we approach that very, very, very differently. So if you came from a traditional organisation, that would be a huge problem for you. And the fact that we're self-managed would be a really different, way of working as well. So we decided that we thought it was harder to unlearn how you've been working in the past than it is to find people with values who align with us, and for us to teach them a new way of working. So we started with our 6 values. Our first value is compassion. Our second value is responsibility. And then we've got collaboration, creativity, flourishing, yes, and curiosity. So those are our values. So we started off by thinking, how could we design a recruitment process that reflected our values, and that meant that we could welcome people who don't already have experience of health and care. So again, traditional recruitment always says you've got to have NVQ level, whatever it is, and you need to have experience in health and care. So we stopped all that. So then I thought, if we were recruiting really, I don't know how many of you are really senior people in your organisation, but what tends to happen with senior people is you're invited to a whole day assessment centre. So we thought, what if we were giving to our recruitment process the same kind of value that you'd expect if you were going for a senior post? And And the other thing is if you are going to a job centre and looking for a job, you have to demonstrate that you're going for interviews and you're applying for interviews. We wanted to make our interview process a much bigger deal by getting rid of interviews completely. So we have a 3-hour workshop. And we're working on the basis that if you're just signing up for interviews to tick boxes for a job centre, you're not going to waste 3 hours of your time coming to 2 hours. So we're intentionally working in ways that stop people who are just trying to tick a box of turning up for interviews or not turning up for interviews. So our process starts with a conversation. We mainly now use Facebook for recruitment. We don't use job boards at the moment. Occasionally we still will if we're looking for very specific people. So in the early days, what I would do is I would post on the job boards in customer service, in bar work, in restaurant work, and in the beauty industry. And I would put the job title of customer representative or bar work. And then I'd say, you might never have thought of a role in care, but if you're somebody who delivers excellent customer service, this could be exactly the right role for you. So we did that kind of thing. We sort of colonized other job boards. And in wellbeing teams at the moment, 80% of our team members have come from outside of adult social care and outside of home care. So we've got beauticians, we've got hairdressers, we've got people who worked in childcare, we've got people who worked in foster care, we've got people who work in retail, we've got people who are waitresses, and we've got some people who work for distribution centres and van drivers. So we've got a very, very diverse range of people. So if you're responding either to our Facebook ads or LinkedIn, or Indeed, it starts off with 3 questions. So we ask people not to send us a CV. We don't look at CVs at all. But if we are recruiting to, say, Wigan, we'd say, we're curious. No, we'd start with, our purpose is to support people to live well and have great and be part of their communities. But our role includes personal care. And I learnt this the really hard way, because the first few times we recruited, we were so focused on well-being and well-being teams and enabling people to have good days. We would have people turning up to the workshops having no idea we're actually talking about personal care as well. That was a really big fail. So we make sure that in our materials on the website, etc., that's really, really clear. But in the first conversation with people, we're checking that people have understood that. So we say the role of wellbeing workers is support people to have great days, but we deliver personal care. So we'll be supporting people to get up in the morning, have medication, have a wash, have clean, etc. And we'll say, what does a great day look like for you? So those of you who've been involved in any sort of the person-centered thinking training will know one of the exercises is what does a good day look like and what does a bad day look like. So we're starting by asking people what a good day looks like for them. So if you're not somebody who is prepared to share personal information and bring your whole self to work, you'll give a very short answer to that, and we probably won't take the process further. And then the second question is around self-management, and we say we're curious. We know that self-management isn't for everybody, and taking personal responsibility and sharing roles within the team might be new to you. So we're curious, what makes you think that self-management could be for you? So again, making it really clear that what's different about this role is it's around self-management. And then the third question is, we're looking for local people to join us in serving people in Wigan. How many miles away do you live from Wigan Town Centre, for example, if that's where we're serving people? So again, those are short questions. We're not expecting pages and pages. We just expect people to do 4 or 5 lines on it. And that either gets emailed to the person who's coordinating this, or at the moment we're testing doing it over Facebook direct messaging, and that's working really well for us because you're not having to come off Facebook and go into email. So we're doing that. So once people have answered those questions, we say, thank you very much. The next phase is to have a chat. So we have Calendly set up, which means that you can choose 20 minutes, half an hour that fits in with you and your life. So we have dates available during the day, during the evening, and at weekends. So that's very different to sending people an interview slot and saying you have to come to that. So again, we're showing this cooperation of of, are you a good fit for us, and are we a good fit for you, and choose something that fits in with your, you know, lifestyle and commitments to have a conversation. So the conversation happens over phones, and we really use it as an opportunity for them to ask us questions and to test out whether we're a good fit for you, as well as us asking a few questions and explaining what the next bit of the process is. We think we can tell in 5 to 10 minutes whether somebody has the potential to be a great wellbeing worker because of how warm they are on the phone, how engaging they are, how chatty they are, and how open they are. And at the end of that 20 minutes, we will give people feedback to say, we're not sure that you could be a good fit for us, and to ask them whether they think they're a good fit, whether they want to carry on with the process. And if they do and if we do, then we send them the application pack. But the application pack invites them to create their own one-page profile and to bring it to the workshop, as well as capturing the legal information that we have to capture. So legally, we have to capture a timeline of your work experience, and to check any gaps. We have to check that you're eligible to work in the UK, and we have to make sure that you have 2 references as well. So we keep paperwork to the absolute minimum. We ask people to complete it and bring it to the workshop. We ask people to bring their one-page profile to the workshop as well. But in the application pack, you'll find my one-page profile, the profile of the team member who is part of the recruitment team, and you'll also find the one-page profile of our co-production partner. So that's somebody with lived experience who's part of the team. So, you know, traditionally in interviews, you're sat behind a table with somebody you know nothing about other than their name and their title, but we're trying to change that by showing that we are bringing our whole selves to work, and we're prepared to be open and vulnerable. And so therefore, when you meet me or the wellbeing leader in the recruitment workshop, you know a bit about me as well. So again, trying to make this a whole place to work, very, very different ways of using power in recruitment. So then you
5 minutes, Helen?
5 minutes, okay. You turn up to the recruitment workshop. It looks really, really different. So first of all, it'll be in a community hall. It will have bunting around it. It will have flowers on the table. It will have tablecloths on the table. There'll be a reception, a welcome desk. There'll be music on. There'll be biscuits or snacks on the table. So we're saying this is different and should feel different. You're welcomed at the reception desk, usually by a co-production partner. And then the whole of the 3 hours are different exercises. And the team will be walking around making notes. We have a very, for each exercise, we have what does good look like. You give people a score out of 5 and you make some notes as well. So we'll be walking around doing that. So we have things like building a tower from spaghetti. And what we do is give people the equipment, and we time it for 16 minutes and the instructions, and obviously seeing how people work together. We have value cards that we do. We have scenario cards. We do hand massage to see how, because we're checking out people's ability to give compassionate touch and follow instructions. And at the end, we do a flipped interview. So people interview me. So we get people into groups of 3, and I'm sat at the front with the wellbeing leader as well, and possibly the co-production partner and the team member. And they have an opportunity to ask me questions as well. And that's the only interviewing that takes place. And we phone and give people feedback the next day. And before they get the feedback about whether they've been successful or not, they get a survey monkey where we go through each part of the process. We say what worked and what didn't work. Will you give us a score out of 5, and will you tell us how we can improve? So we are learning every time we do this about how we can keep getting better and better at recruitment. But what we're also showing is our value of collaboration and how we want to and our curiosity about how we can keep growing and developing. I'm sorry I'm not quick enough to be paying attention to what's going on in
it's
the
okay.
chat at the same time.
I'm happy to just point your attention to them. So just to keep on the theme of recruitment, Andrea's asking, she loves the recruitment process. What about the highly skilled and needed introverts? Do they engage in this process?
I am an introvert. I am an off-the-scale introvert. So we have created the process so that it works for introverts and extroverts. So with our, say, values cards, we have people sat in a team of 6. The cards are in the middle. The first person takes a card, answers it, puts it down, passes it on. So it's not, there's no fighting for airspace or trying to get your word in at all. I think that's so, so important. The only time that does happen is in the doing the spaghetti towers. But what we're looking for is not the most powerful person or the most pushy person. We're looking for how people share responsibility together and engage together.
Helen, is the co-production partner is somebody with lived experience? Is that right? So
that's
somebody
right, yes.
you support or a family member? Is that?
It's different. So in Wigan and for our services supporting older people, it's Helen. Helen Radcliffe was a carer of her husband who received home care. So she has lots of experiences of home care, but carers coming in and out of her door. And when we sit down as a recruitment team at the end and talk about who we're going to invite, the first question is, Helen, is there anybody you would not feel comfortable coming through your door? So Helen has the first say in who eventually gets recruited. So is there anybody that you wouldn't feel comfortable? Now we would then interrogate that and check it against the scores, but she is an equal decision-making partner to everybody else.
And a question that Ruth raised earlier on, so we don't have a lot of time, but could you you mentioned before about some of the safeguards you have in place. Can you touch on some of them, do you think?
Yes. So traditionally, a manager would be responsible for spotting safeguarding issues and raising them, but we share that responsibility across the whole of the team. And therefore, one of the things that we do is make sure all the team are confident in knowing what they would need to raise and how to raise it. And we do that through our scenario cards as well as training. One of the areas that we're different from other people, and I'll talk about the safeguarding around that, is accepting gifts. So accepting gifts in most organisations is an absolute no-no. We think if somebody's offering you a gift, to say no and to refuse it is insulting, and it isn't how we build relationships together. So if somebody gives you a box of chocolates, we would encourage you to say thank you very much, that's really lovely. We would be delighted if you then chose to bring those box of chocolates to the team meeting, but that's not a given. But what has to happen is that if you've received a gift, you have to tell people at the team meeting. So if we found somebody was regularly receiving gifts and the value of those was escalating and they were happening regularly, because they need to be shared at a team meeting, we would expect team members to raise that as a tension and say, we've got a concern about this, can we explore it, and all feel confident that this is happening in a way that we all feel comfortable with. So traditional organisations manage their discomfort around gifts by completely banning it. We don't think that's appropriate. We say, let's be transparent with our information here. Let's explore each issue and make sure we're comfortable with it. We have a general rule of thumb that policy that you don't accept gifts that are over £50, because we think that is tripping into financial abuse. So we do have those, but we don't have the absolute ban question. We encourage people to see people outside of work. So somebody we support called John loves car boot sales. Becky was his link worker. She goes sometimes to a car boot sale on a Sunday morning. Becky and her mum picked up John to go to a car boot sale. We think that's fantastic, but what we ask is that that's shared on Slack so that everybody knows that that's happening. And again, if people have got concerns about that, they can raise that at a team meeting. So we go for transparency of information, and we go for us all sharing responsibility for raising anything that we feel even mildly concerned about.
Okay, there was just one quick question before I hand over to Susan, which was from Ruth, which was around upskilling people who have no experience in the sector.
Yes, so we have to do a lot of focus on training if we're inviting people who are outside the sector. So we do a lot of work on e-learning. There is a 4-day induction program as well, but then we do a big focus on coaching. So you go out shadowing people, and there'll be a coach supporting you too. And what we sometimes do as part of our recruitment process is, after you've done the 3-hour workshop, we invite you to go and shadow an existing team member to see what the work is actually like, if we have any concerns that you aren't really knowledgeable about what that is. Obviously, we do that with people we support who are keen to be part of our recruitment process. We have this as part of our recruitment process. It doesn't include personal care, and we ask the person we support for their feedback on the person as well when we do that. So we have that up our sleeve as a possibility too. However, when we recruit 10 people, we know we'll lose 2 people within the first 3 months who don't have experience of home care, because however good we are at describing it, etc., and training people in it, etc., some people will just find it's not for them. And that's good, and it's good to learn that within the first 3 months. So we tend to over-recruit in order to compensate for that.
Thanks, Helen. Susan?
Thanks, everybody. Great questions. I just need to take a couple breaths together to transition from one thing to another. So I'll invite us to do the same. Helen, I'd love to just hear you talk a little bit about if you can remember that original impulse that you had. Originally around HSA, your consulting company, and relinquishing your CEO-ness to the entity, and then further your journey around. We have this conversation a lot around how can we be efficacious and have the legitimacy to talk about this work unless we're doing the work. So both of those, I know for me, and I'm assuming for you, have required a lot of undoing of your personal, maybe beliefs, expectations of yourself, expectations around power, expectations around capacity. So I'd love to just ask you to share with this group what that's been like for you.
If we start with HSA, so we were a training and development, or we still are, it's still a collective of consultants, so a training and development company who was scattered across the country. And we felt like family, we felt really, really close. But we would choose, so Brené Brown talks about choosing courage over comfort. We would choose being friendly over accountability. We'd choose being nice to each other over having courageous conversations. And lots of being the CEO, I felt like I was mum, so everything went through me, and people looked to me to make decisions. And although we had lead areas, I could interfere in everything, and I could make decisions about everything, and I was the only person who knew what was going on with the finances. So then transitioning from that to everybody having clear roles. And so we still had leadership areas, but we were really clear about the responsibility of people who led that. It was a really big shift for all of us to transition from not passing things by me and not making sure I was informed of everything. And I think my learning was, I think I was so anxious about not still maintaining the vestiges of being CEO that I stepped back too far. So I thought that actually I had to just be like everybody else in terms of how I used power. And I think on one hand that is true, but I was also the founder of HSA, and there are some things around being the founder that still need to be in play with an organisation. And I found, I remember people would tell me that I was too brusque sometimes. So Jill would email me and say, what do you think about this, Helen? And I would say, hi Jill, why are you asking me? It's not my role. And whereas you can say that with a smile to somebody face to face, it can come across as a bit sharper than that when it's on email. So I had to do lots of stuff of helping the team and myself recognize that I wasn't involved in everything. And it was like folding your arms, but folding it the other way. And it always felt odd and uncomfortable. And it took 6 months for it to stop feeling odd and uncomfortable. What we're really doing when we do this is we're changing the psychological contract with staff. And we lost 2 team members over those 6 months. And they told me they joined HSA for me and my leadership, and they felt that I'd stepped back as a leader, and that therefore wasn't the organisation they wanted to be part of anymore, is what one person said. And the other person said, I prefer being managed because actually this feels too hard. So that was that transition.
Helen, can I ask you to step right back to maybe sinking into what was the impulse in the first place to change?
For HSA?
For you as a leader to say, I want this to be different, and it needs to be different.
It was reading Frederick's book, and so reading Reinventing Organisations, and feeling that he was somebody who was who could articulate what I felt, but couldn't put into words. And then when you see the different levels of the different developments of organisation, we were clearly in green, a sort of family one, but it also showed what are the challenges of that around accountability. And it was the picture of HSA. And it just felt like this is who I am, is wanting to work like that. That's exactly how I want to work. And ironically, if you know anything about Myers-Briggs type is I'm an INTJ. So that means I like things well organised and clear, but I'm also quite controlling. So in some ways, I am the opposite of what of the people for whom this would come naturally. So for me, it's been a really big personal journey to say I am comfortable with who I am as an INTJ, but I want to learn how to work that way and think differently about power and share power and responsibility and manage my stuff about needing to control, because that comes from anxiety.
Just before I ask you to talk about well-being teams, Angela is such a great provocateur. And in her check-in, she was talking about both the psychological unwiring of and noticing of the things that are so entrenched in us, especially around having a ladder to climb, seeing the next step in the career, something clear and concise to aspire to that normally equates to something like, if I learn these skills, I will get more money. Curious about how that settles with you and how you have those conversations with people.
I think having a career path is still important, and I don't think moving to self-managed teams takes that away. So back to recruitment, Kate, at the beginning, we say there are different roles within self-managed teams, and there are different roles that have different numerical values attached to them, different pay grades, different salaries, but that doesn't mean that you are over people or managing people, but there are some things for which we need a different skill set that gets paid differently. So I think that's a myth that you wouldn't have different pay grades, but it's how power gets used and how those roles come together that really matters. I think for me, I knew I could never work in a hierarchical organisation because I'm too much of a maverick as well. So I'd already burnt any bridges that I could have in terms of working in a traditional hierarchical organisation. So for me, the only other way of working is doing the kind of things that I'm doing. I'm not sure if that completely answers that. Yeah. But so I think you can have different pay grades and different responsibilities in self-management, and all the sort of setting salaries stuff speaks to that. We don't practice that, but I don't think the two things are mutually exclusive.
And so, yeah, I'd love to just hear you, because I know that you think a lot about and take your purpose or what your meaningful work is incredibly seriously. And I'd love to hear how that moves inside you and how it's led you to where you are, and what work did you have to do to make that real?
So my purpose, my personal purpose, and if you know Simon Sinek's work, he would talk about finding your why. So it's the same thing. So my purpose is to inspire, demonstrate, and innovate change in health and social care where everybody's well-being matters. And I would have had the same purpose if I'd met you 5 years ago, except for the demonstrate bit. Because I was working as a consultant and as a trainer. And then it would be, inspire and support change in health and social care. But when I got to 50, I both, read Frederick Lou's book. I read Atul Gawand's book, which is called Being Mortal, which really opened my eyes to thinking about older age and whether I could make a contribution there. But my dad died when he was 53. Excuse me. And I was kind of asking myself, if I only had 3 years left like my dad, is this how I want to live? And although I hope that I'd made a difference in HSA, and we were responsible for one-page profiles and person-centered reviews, and I'd worked at a national level, what I'd also recognised is working as a consultant, there's only so far you can go. It's somebody else's CQC registration, somebody else's money, somebody else's capacity for bravery and to change things. And I've done some really great, I worked for 2 years with Dimensions, doing a really significant piece of work, worked in a care home for 2 years, made lots of change. But I know you change the leadership and your work is gone in a heartbeat. And therefore, in terms of legacy, I'm making a big change. And also, what I've heard over the years of being a consultant is people say, well, we'd love to do that, but CQC won't let us. That's our regulator. Or we'd love to do that, but, commissioners wouldn't let us. So I have a redhead heart, and my middle names are Bloody Minded Tenacity. So I thought, look at this, I'm going to see if I can do this. If I only had 3 years left, why don't I become a provider and see if I can do this? I wasn't really that brave at first. I thought we could do this, but I'll do it as a social franchise, which is like a next step up from consultancy. So I thought that would be fine. And I reached out to some people that I already knew and had the concept of wellbeing team, knew about Birtsorg, had all the ideas in place, had designed it. And went to put it into practice with an owner of a home care organisation who allowed us to recruit a team, etc. And that blew up in 2 months. So I then went somewhere else to somebody else I know, and we did it again, and that blew up in 4 months. And then I went somewhere else, and that finished in 5 months. And then I went to Love to Care in Devon. I was really excited about this because I thought this was our really best chance because they were just starting. And we worked together for 6 months. And then at the end of 6 months, they said to me, as every other one had said to me, they said, Helen, we love your paperwork. We love how person-centered it is. That's really, really brilliant. They would say, we love how you recruit because we developed that recruitment process by then. That's brilliant. We love that. We love the meeting structure. That's brilliant. But that self-management stuff, that's too hard and we don't want to do it anymore. I felt like I'd been dumped by a boyfriend. That's not happened to me for 20 years, but I felt like I'd been dumped by a boyfriend. I was heartbroken. And that's what then made me decide, okay, I'm going to set up as a provider. I'm going to be a registered manager. I'm going to see how far we can go with this. But the challenge then, Susan, was because I was legally responsible as the registered manager, because it was my service again, it was as if I was stepping back into a CEO role, but without wanting to do this. So for 18 months, I have had the knot of anxiety under my stomach that says, can we really do this? And I felt like I've been holding it again. So I'm now just shifting into having a national team working with me who share holding that responsibility. And I no longer hold the responsibility operationally. My role is development. So again, it feels like I've gone back through that circle and visiting again in another way, but really clear that that's not, that that I don't want to be a CEO and I don't have that responsibility, but I have a really clear role to play.
What's shifted in yourself? Like, what did you used to believe about yourself 2, 3, 4 years ago that you don't believe anymore?
2, 3 years ago, I would have had a 5-year plan and a 3-year plan and a 1-year plan. And these would be my career aspirations. So not hierarchical going up the career, but sort of thought leader type stuff. I don't have any of those anymore. I believed in planning. I don't believe in planning anymore. I think that, and I don't believe in goal setting personally in the same way. I believe in sensing opportunities and taking them and seeing where they go. And I don't believe I can control the world as much as I thought I could 3 or 4 years ago. So I think whereas 3 or 4 years ago I would have had goals, and now I have practices. And I think I do something called morning pages every morning. And I go back to my purpose every morning and I say, how can I show up like this today? What opportunities can how can I show up? And how can I respond to opportunities in a way that makes it more likely I can move towards that? So I'd have 6 or 7 things that I am focusing on, but I won't say this will look like this in 6 months or look like this in 12 months. It's like an intent. Here's what I'd like to see happening, but I recognise that I can't control all of that. So how do I show up and move in that direction? So I feel and think completely differently about control and what I can control and what I have power over. So I think I'm much more open. Yes, I'm much more open. I'm a big fan of Brené Brown's. I am learning to get better at having courageous conversations. I'm not great at that. Yes.
One more question before I let you go. If I could have just showed you a video of your sharing over the last 2 minutes even to Helen 3 years ago, how would that have felt? Would you have ever believed? What would you think about that? Because you show up with so much authenticity and vulnerability. It's hard for me and probably anybody to believe that maybe wasn't possible a couple of years ago.
What do I think? I think that if I was sat where you're sitting now, when I first embarked on this, I thought I was learning new processes and new techniques. I didn't realise what I was really doing is I think going on a self-development program I had no idea about. I think because it's changed how I show up and how I see the world, and I guess how I want to be with people. And 3 years ago, Susan, I would have been hugely embarrassed that I'm sitting here crying as I'm talking to you. I would have seen that as some sort of professional failure, that I hadn't kept my shit together while I was having conversations with people. But I'm okay with that now.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thanks,
all the best of the course. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Just keen, how did that land? Reflections, questions.
I thought that was really fascinating ending, I guess, because the beginning was a lot about detail processes, which to me seems so amazing. And hearing her talk more about it, I realized it had taken some time to get there. But then realizing that, yeah, there's that whole personal development that's really been the most impactful part of her journey, which is really interesting. Yeah, I don't know if you saw, I watched the video that the CEO of Avivo did, and it seems that a lot of that journey, some of you are from Avivo, and I know, Wendy, you've been there, but it seemed also similarly, you know, the end goal is one thing, but the whole process seems to be that development focus, which I guess links to the DDOs. But yeah, I found that very interesting.
Just do some open mic reflection. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit. What I thought was really interesting, because it just sort of mirrored a little bit of my journey. So 2.5 years in this organisation as CEO, and having a conceptual framework that had been developed over maybe 5 or 7 years, and then coming here with really clear insight about what the self-organising opportunity was, and then realising that basically I'd created this whole framework, and it was about how everyone was going to bring their full self to work. So it felt like, you know, just a real disconnect between, you know, sharing with the peeps but telling them what it is we're going to share. But some of what Helen had said reminded me of my own sort of journey on that, because, you know, when she said she had her constructs or whatever her words were, you know, this is what it was that she was seeking to achieve. Yeah, it resonated, because you know, as CEO, I guess I have the authority to share the decision making with others. But I was sort of beating myself up a bit, perhaps about a year or so ago, realising that what I hadn't shared was the opportunity for people to say that this is what it might look like. And Nikki, who's on the channel now, so she brought ideas in, and there was definitely a willingness for ideas to come in. But how much of it I'd already designed conceptually in my head. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing anymore, but I did sort of struggle with that a bit. But we'll see how it goes as more people get the opportunity to say, this is how it works in our neighbourhood, because then it won't be about what I control, because I wouldn't be able to. I don't think getting the genie in the box is possible.
Thanks, Justin. Anybody else like to share?
I'll go for a minute. I just loved, I've known Helen for a while as well, and we did some work together a fair number of years ago. And it just gave me a little giggle inside of how she doesn't believe in goal setting and planning anymore. Like, really?
That's awesome. I could have fell over, Michaela. I was like, you've got to be joking me.
No. Yeah. And that to focus in on my purpose and my practices and how I can show up in the world to further my purpose and bring my purpose into the world. That's just, and crying, I cry in meetings all the time. So go crying, makes you smarter.
I thought she was really inspiring, and we did only get that, I think someone else commented, you know, towards the end when she, you know, said how many times she tried that other method, you know, 5 months, 3 months, 6 months, and each time she wasn't getting where she wanted to go. So just that persistence, and that vision to really want to make a difference, and that whole, you know, I'm thinking, what would I do if I only had 3 years? You know, what I do. So yeah, she was wonderful, and she's coming to Melbourne in September, I believe.
Go for it, Andrea.
Yeah, so I think for me,
so your audio is really bad. We can barely hear you. Could you put headphones in? Not really. Not really.
Okay, all right. Leave it then.
I mean, you can try if we really concentrate. Who else would like to share?
I think what's coming up for me is that I'm thinking back on some of the past conversations that we've had as a group where we get really, we just want to get our hands on the answers to how to like put this stuff into practice. Like, yeah, I get all of the good, the kind of the values-based stuff around like why this would be important, but I want to know how to put it into action. I think what's interesting for me, sort of reflecting on Helen's approach, is that, well, I think one thing, there's maybe a bit of forgiveness for ourselves around that it does take time and patience, persistence, that sort of determination, sticking with it. And secondly, that perhaps one of the most helpful things that we can do for ourselves through that process is really keep ourselves grounded in why we are doing it. What do we believe our purpose to be? And what are the values that we have that we really want to bring forward in this work, and keep kind of bringing ourselves back to that. That came through quite strongly for me in a lot of the different, the how-to, the everyday stuff that her team have developed, that the values that those practices were grounded in just came through really strongly. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
I'd love to hear your reflection, Kate, and then maybe you can bring us into the invitation for what's going on between now and our final session before we check out. But I'd love to hear your reflection on Helen.
I think I've got a lot of thoughts going on, but probably the kind of big one, which maybe is I'm kind of stuck here anyway, because that was where I entered the room with a particular mindset, but about that stuff around it being a journey. I almost think, I was talking to Helen yesterday actually about organisations who I'll come across who say we want to do that self-managing thing, because self-managing now is like the sexy new person-centred thing that was 10 years ago. You know, it's just kind of, and now, I didn't think this even a year ago, but now I think it feels very raw. So it feels like you can't do this work without it having an impact on who you think you are, if that makes sense. So what I was thinking was, I've been paid ages ago to write something about leadership. And years ago, I used to run a course for Lancaster University called Leadership for Change. And I thought, oh, that'd be easy. You know, I'll dig all that old material out and bingo, put something together, that'll be champion. And now I feel like I don't know what I think about leadership now. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know. And I would not be in that position had I not been in the middle of the work, I think. So that thing about being in it and doing it and what that means for me, I think is incredibly important. More so than whether a team functions like this and has these roles and does these things. I think that's probably really, really loud for me at the minute, which, yeah, is really helpful to hear other people's perspectives on being in that space as well, which is really good. So yeah, I don't know if that was helpful at all, but that's where my head is at the moment.
And then Andrea saying, listening to Helen amplifies the importance of growing into the possibilities and bigness of who we are and how we're offering this work. And I'd love to talk about this stuff. Like, I'd love to do almost either a community of practice or work for people that are interested in really sensing into what that is. Because I think that for me, understanding how, it's like the butterfly effect, how this one little action of tweeting something or reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn or, understanding how many of us are in this emergent journey is super interesting. Anyway, Kate, what's next?
Okay. So we're meeting in 2 weeks' time. It's the last session. So it's an open reflection session. And Susan and I were thinking, because this has been definitely a different experience than the first one, which of course it will be, but yeah, quite a different experience this time round. So we were wondering whether you would be willing to prepare a kind of 5 minutes, I don't know, reflection share on what the learning or development has had an impact on, either for yourself or in the organisation. So if you want to keep it really practical, it can be a 5-minute share on, we've tried this with the team, this is what we did, this is what it looked like. If you want to take it a bit deeper around what that's meant for you and your role, your reflections, and that, you know, it's entirely up to you. But we want to give some space to do some kind of reflection thinking and to be able to tie it together really on where you're at and how that might help other people. Does that feel like a reasonable invitation? Okay, Michaela and Andrea, you're definitely doing it because you're the ones who are giving me all the verbal indication. I'm not sure about everybody else, but I'll give you a couple of weeks to think about it. Yeah, so that was where we're at. I think the chance, our next session, to just do a bit of recap on all of the speakers, the bits of theory that we've looked at. I think we'll pull that together, which might kind of jog our memories way back to the first session around why we were even thinking about rethinking organisations. Like, do you need to rethink them? You know, are things okay for everybody who is working in human services? I think it feels to me like the emperor's new clothes. It's like almost once you notice he's got no clothes on, it's everywhere you look. But yeah, that might not make any sense to you, but that's my analogy. That's the invitation. So that's in 2 weeks' time. The time slot for that, I'm just going to check because I know the times move about a bit with...
I would appreciate if we could do this time slot. If that
it's not, Susan. It's it's 10 o'clock in the morning.
How would people feel if we used this time slot instead? Any objections? No? Okay. Okay, we'll figure it out.
Okay, are you still in Europe? It's about time you came home, isn't it?
Be home on the 29th.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, between now and then, what about, I'll ask Bev if she can kind of look a bit around, is there any movement? Who's got movement? Is there a place that we could land somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, great.
Okay?
Or I can do a middle of the night once for you because you're so awesome.
Well, it only takes you 7 minutes to get ready, so that'd work. Okay, shall we do a checkout then? So shall we just do one word and we won't call on everybody, just kind of, if you feel you're up for putting a word into the room as we leave today.
I'll jump in. Definitely inspired, but I'll also, because if the time slots don't change, then I'll have to be an apology for next time. And I just want to thank you all for putting this on, and it's been awesome. And I've learnt a lot and been inspired. Thank you.
My checkout is reflective. Thank you.
Mine is wholeness.
Mine is vulnerability, and that's just kind of from Helen being so vulnerable in that moment. And I just think this whole self-managing thing demands so much honesty about yourself that, yeah, vulnerability.
Mine is kindness.
The two things that I heard most strongly in this session was one from Kate, which was you can't do this work without it having an impact on who you think you are. And Helen's noticing that she used to have goals and now she has practices. Sorry, that was more than one word.
Mine's connected.
Mine's tenderness. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Shall we finish there then?
Yep, I'll have the video
And we'll
up. And
you put the video up. Great. We'll see each other in 2 weeks, and we'll do some jiggery pokery with the time and find some magical slot for us all to meet.
thanks, everybody. That was awesome.
Okay.
See ya.
See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.